In the year 1480 in Romania, Prince Vlad marries Elisabeta, and as a symbol of their love, he gives her a small music box. One day, knights arrive at his home to take Vlad to war. The country is at war, and since the enemy is approaching, Vlad orders his men to take Elisabeta to another castle for safety. Before leaving, the Pope offers a prayer for Vlad, and Vlad asks for holy protection for his wife. In the forest, Elisabeta is escorted to the new location. Unfortunately, an enemy soldier is hiding among the trees and immediately kills 2 guards with a single arrow. While the other guards prepare to fight, Elisabeta rides forward. Outside the forest, Vlad uses fire to hold back the enemy lines. A fierce battle begins and many men die on both sides. But Vlad's army has the advantage. With great skill and teamwork, they fight hard and win the battle. Moments later, Vlad and his army appear before the enemy king, carrying the heads of all their enemies. At that same moment, he is informed that his wife has been attacked. So he rushes away to find Elisabeta. Meanwhile, Elisabeta is riding her horse while enemy soldiers chase her. This area is known as the Forest of Wolves, and thousands of bear traps are hidden under the snow. 2 soldiers fall into these traps while Elisabeta skillfully avoids them. Unfortunately, her horse eventually gets caught in one of the traps and she falls, allowing the enemy to surround her. They carefully test the ground with their spears, and Elisabeta is also trapped. When Vlad arrives, his horse also gets caught in a trap and falls. He continues on foot and soon fights 2 enemy soldiers, defeating them both. Then he throws a sword to kill a man who is approaching Elisabeta. But the sword accidentally strikes Elisabeta as well. Vlad holds his wife in his arms, but she dies. Sometime later, Vlad visits the Pope again and complains about the failure to protect his wife. In the name of the Pope, Vlad has committed many killings, and now he demands Elisabeta's return and asks the Pope for a miracle, but the Pope cannot do such a thing. Vlad kills the Pope with a cross and declares that he will no longer follow his religion unless Elisabeta is brought back. Suddenly, a strong wind blows inside the room and the statue begins to cry, but Vlad does not care. His wild followers are forced to drag him out of the church. 400 years later in France, a priest goes to a psychiatric clinic and speaks with Dr. Dumont, who says he has a very sensitive case that has even worried the Queen of England. Then they walk through the clinic corridors where dozens of mad patients behave wildly while doctors drag them from place to place. Finally, they pass through a steel door and reach a sealed room where Maria is chained. Maria is an Italian woman who was engaged to the Queen's great-nephew, and because she opposed the church, the wedding was held at the family estate. However, the groom brought a bishop to bless the union, and the sight of the bishop threw Maria into hysteria. According to records, Maria was born in 1759, which is impossible because it would mean she is 130 years old. Her age and her hatred of religion make them think she is a creature of the devil. While the men discuss this, Maria wakes up and hisses at them. The priest looks closer and notices her sharp fangs. He concludes that she is a vampire. He explains that she is the first one ever captured alive, and that vampires are vulnerable to light. They can only tolerate indirect rays. To prove this, he opens the window, and the sunlight immediately burns her skin. When the priest holds a cross in front of her face, it begins to burn her. Then he cuts the finger of Dumont's assistant Simon and lets a few drops of blood fall into Maria's mouth to force her to cooperate. By checking her neck, the priest finds the bite marks that turned her into a vampire. He explains that the church has been fighting vampires for centuries, but they have never found the original vampire who started it all. Maria, thirsty for more blood, reveals that the first vampire is her master. He is a prince who will soon come to the city searching for his princess. Meanwhile, Jonathan, a night notary, is traveling through the forest. Suddenly, the driver stops the carriage and says he cannot go any further because wolves will soon appear. He leaves Jonathan alone with a lantern, a torch, and his cross. Jonathan finishes the journey on foot while keeping the wolves away with the torch. At last he arrives at a huge castle, and when he passes through the entrance gate, it closes behind him by itself. Another door opens and closes, allowing Jonathan to enter a room where someone waits on the balcony, then disappears in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, a strange old man appears. He throws away the torch, lights the lamps, and introduces himself as Prince Vlad, also known as Count Dracula. They both sit at the table, and Jonathan happily eats the delicious food. But Dracula has no plate. With a wave of his hand, he sends a plate sliding toward Jonathan, who thinks it is just a trick. Then Jonathan searches in his bag for some papers, and while he is distracted, Dracula kills a mouse with his fork. He crushes it with his bare hand, pours his blood into his cup, and drinks it. Jonathan explains that the county he represents is interested in buying an old church in Paris that belongs to Dracula, hoping to turn it into a hospital. While taking out more papers, his cross accidentally falls. When Dracula asks if he is devoted to religion, Jonathan says no and explains that his mentor gave him the cross. With a simple motion of his hand, Dracula throws the cross into the fire, then suddenly appears beside Jonathan and tells him that it is time to sleep, which frightens him. After Jonathan is taken to his room, Dracula tells him not to leave it during the night. He returns to the dining room, tells a gargoyle to watch him, and then starts playing music. Jonathan finds a book in the room and looks at a text explaining the history of the castle. There is a painting of a young Vlad, but the portrait of the prince is missing. Meanwhile, the priest visits Maria's fiancé Henry and tells him that Maria is safe, but they are still trying to keep her away from the city. The priest then searches Maria's room for more clues. Among her belongings, he finds a missing page from a book that shows a picture of Elisabetta. At midnight, Jonathan leaves his room. As he looks around, he sees a light behind a door. He goes through it and reaches some frightening stairs that lead him to a luxurious basement. In the middle of the room, he sees a coffin, and when he opens it, he finds Dracula sleeping inside. Dracula tells him that he should not have left his room, and suddenly a gargoyle knocks him unconscious from behind. When he wakes up, he finds himself chained by the gargoyles and hanging upside down. Dracula cuts his neck and pours his blood into a bowl. When Jonathan asks how such a creature can exist, Dracula laughs in a very disturbing way and asks about his final wish. Jonathan says he wants to know Dracula's story, and Dracula finds the idea so interesting that he orders the gargoyles to put him back on the ground. While remembering Elisabetta's funeral, Dracula shares what happened. He explains that he has spent all these centuries waiting for her because he knows that pure souls can be reborn. The search was not easy. During the Black Death, for example, half of the women died and the rest gathered in sacred places where he could not approach them. He became so lonely that he envied humans because they could die. One day he fell asleep on Elisabetta's grave. The next morning he woke up with such despair that he went to the nearest window and tried to destroy himself, but he survived the fall. He tried again and again, yet every time he fell he always survived. Since he could not search the entire world for Elisabetta, he decided to create a plan to attract her to him. For more than a century, he used the most beautiful and magical flowers to create a powerful perfume. Finally, he tested the perfume in Italy, where women immediately began to follow him. The scent was so powerful that he could enter parties and make everyone dance together under his control. One day in Versailles, he thought he had finally found Elisabetta, but the woman he approached was not his wife. This made him cry, and he realized that moving from one party to another was useless. So he decided to stop searching himself and force others to do it for him. In the middle of a party, he began biting all the women, turning them into vampires, including Maria. After that, he returned to Elisabetta's grave and opened it, only to discover that nothing remained except ashes. That he suffered a mental collapse and decided that he would never leave the castle again. The gargoyles brought him wealth and served as his servants while his vampires continued the search. In the present, Jonathan tells Dracula that he can understand such powerful love because he is also engaged. His necklace contains a picture of his fiancée Mina, and when Dracula looks at it, he realizes that the woman is the reincarnation of his wife. He becomes emotional and decides to spare Jonathan's life. Then he calls all of his gargoyles and orders them to bring him a lot of blood because he wants to look beautiful before meeting Elisabetta again. In Paris, the priest shows the picture he found to Dumont and says they must find a woman who looks like her in order to capture Dracula. The priest reads a part of a book explaining that in cases of blasphemy, a person can be deprived of the blessing of death, but if true repentance happens, God can forgive them and remove the curse. This means that if they kill Dracula, all the vampires he created will become human again. At that moment, Simon enters the office, sees the picture, and mentions that a woman who looks exactly like it is in the visitor section. Dumont and the priest go to another room and meet Mina, who says she is Maria's close friend. They met at a party a few days earlier, and since then Maria has not left her side. Maria had always been kind until she saw the bishop at her wedding. Mina admits that she is not sure about her own marriage because she feels like she does not belong to this time. In a church, Dracula appears disguised as a homeless man, and the nuns kindly give him shelter. But as soon as he enters, he removes his disguise and sprays his perfume on a statue, which causes all the nuns to rush toward the church. Filled with desire, they kneel around him, and Dracula feeds on them without hesitation. Back at the castle, Jonathan waits until he is alone and uses a blanket to pull some tools closer to himself and break his chains. A gargoyle sees him climbing toward the window and immediately tears the blanket to remove his support. However, Jonathan manages to cling to the wall. Then the gargoyles try to reach him through several holes but fail, so one of them strikes him with a hook and throws him down. Jonathan falls onto a frozen lake. When one gargoyle tries to follow him, the ice breaks and the creature sinks. The others do not know how to reach him, and Jonathan slowly moves away in fear. Sometime later, Dracula, now younger and healthier, arrives at the psychiatric clinic. Using his perfume, he controls Simon and forces him to show Maria's room. Maria tells Dracula that she has found Elisabetta, and as a reward, he allows her to feed on Simon. The next morning, the priest is doing research and finds a picture of Vlad. Later, he is called to the clinic. Dumont explains that Maria has disappeared and Simon has turned into a vampire. The priest notices Simon's fangs and the strong perfume on his clothes. When Dumont describes the man who took Maria away, the priest realizes that Mina is in danger. At the boarding house, Mina hears a knock at the door and sees Maria, who looks healthy, and says Dumont has released her. Maria tells Mina that a friend wants to meet her and persuades her to wear nicer clothes. Then they go to a hotel where Dracula is waiting. Seeing the face of his wife again makes Dracula cry. After praising Mina with many compliments, he kisses her hand, which causes Mina to see a vision of them together. Feeling uneasy, she pulls her hand away and goes with Maria to a festival for fun. While they enjoy food, drinks, games, and a fake sea monster show, Dracula secretly follows them. When they enter a haunted house attraction, the women separate and Mina becomes lost. After screaming at the sight of a fake skeleton, Dracula suddenly appears beside her and guides her outside. At a shooting booth, he teaches her how to shoot, and while she stands in his arms, Mina sees another vision of the past. After that, Dracula invites her to his hotel room. They talk for a while, and he shows her the small music box. When he plays the melody, Mina feels it is familiar and begins to see visions of Elisabetta. She quickly steps back and accuses him of enchanting her. Dracula tries to explain the story of Elisabetta and his efforts to find her reincarnation, but the girl insists that she is only Mina. By giving her the music box as a gift, he ends their conversation. Later, Maria takes Mina to watch a fireworks show. At the end of the night, Dracula walks Mina home, and she says goodbye with a sweet smile. But her happiness turns to shock when she sees the priest and Dumont in the living room, caring for the sick Jonathan. The priest explains what happened to her fiancé, but Mina refuses to believe that Dracula could be cruel. The priest explains that Dracula is a vampire who feeds on human promises. She will never become his victim. Mina's nose suddenly begins to bleed. Dracula catches the blood with his fingers and tastes it, then holds her hand and whispers loving words as the visions return. When Mina hears the final words he once said to Elisabetta, she finally accepts the memory's lud and uses perfume to control his victims. He examines Mina's neck and is relieved to see no bite marks. Mina goes to her room and cries alone. When she opens the music box, she repeatedly sees visions of Elisabetta, and the visions only stop when Dracula suddenly appears beside her. Mina asks him to leave, so Dracula tries to escape through the window. Not knowing about his powers, Mina thinks he wants to end his life and stops him, accusing him of deception. Dracula assures her that he has never used force on her and throws the perfume bottle into the fire. She asks about drinking blood, and he admits it but as her own and kisses him. At that moment, Mina asks for immortality, so Dracula bites her and begins transforming her. Just then the priest smells the same perfume he detected at the clinic and realizes that Dracula is inside the house. The priest grabs a gun and runs to Mina's bedroom, but finds it empty. The priest and Dumont think Dracula must have taken Mina to his castle, and Jonathan agrees to guide them there. Meanwhile, Maria meets Henry again. At first, she acts kindly to distract him, but when she tries to bite him, the priest's group suddenly arrives. Maria hisses with anger and prepares to attack, but the priest shoots her with a gun. Even so, she rises again and throws Henry to the ground before grabbing the priest and trying to kill him. Jonathan finds a sword on the wall and quickly cuts off Maria's head. Her head flies through the air and knocks Dumont to the ground while her body continues choking the priest before collapsing. Since the body is still shaking, the priest takes a cross and drives it into Maria's heart to destroy her forever. In Romania, a group of servants carries a coffin into the castle. Dracula and Mina come out of it, and Mina finally sees the castle. After meeting the gargoyles, she plays the music box and puts on Elisabetta's dress. At the castle gate, the priest's team arrives with several soldiers. They wait for the servants to leave, then rush the gate and force their way inside. A soldier shoots the entrance door while men near the forest fire cannons, causing many parts of the castle to collapse. Dracula tells Mina to stay in the room and goes outside to fight, but Mina is terrified as the cannon fire begins breaking the roof. The gargoyles go down to fight the soldiers, yet the army is larger and the humans continue advancing and taking control of the castle. Jonathan guides his friends to the basement while the soldiers search the upper floors. Mina sees them coming and locks the door. In the basement, soldiers shoot the coffin. Dracula suddenly appears behind Jonathan and knocks him unconscious while calling him ungrateful. Then he begins fighting the soldiers with his sword, moving quickly among them and killing them one by one with precise strikes. Soon more soldiers arrive, but Dracula kills them as well. Henry uses the distraction and shoots him with 2 guns at the same time, yet it has no effect. Dracula jumps on him and bites his neck. With a wave of his hand, he shuts the door to stop more soldiers from entering and holds the priest at sword point. The priest tells him that God never wanted him to kill for him because God does not want his creation destroyed. When people kill, they do it for themselves. When the priest says he was sent by God to save him, Dracula replies that his only salvation is Mina. However, the priest insists that Dracula's curse will remain. Hearing Mina's screams, Dracula runs toward her and orders his gargoyles to buy him time. While the strange creatures fight the men in the hall, Dracula kills every soldier nearby. Then he rushes into the room and takes Mina in his arms. The priest tries to follow him, but Dracula closes the door with a gesture. Even so, the priest reminds him that if he truly loves his wife, he must do the right thing. Ignoring Mina's pleas, Dracula leaves the room and locks her inside. He leans in pain as the priest drives a stake into Dracula's heart to kill him. Afterward, Mina pulls him into the room and they exchange their final loving words before Dracula turns to ashes. All the lights in the castle go out and the gargoyles turn back into human children. Jonathan comes looking for Mina and finds her crying over the ashes floating in the air. Realizing that he has lost his love, Jonathan walks away. Outside the castle, Dracula's ashes scatter into the wind.